have, did that bring a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling to your heart when you got the notice? Does anything that the Fed does, or that they do, bring a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling to your heart? See, that's the purpose of the amendments to the Constitution, is to limit the federal government and what they can do. It's not to tell the people what their rights are, it's to tell the federal government what their rights aren't, which is everything not delineated in those first amendments. That's what the 10th Amendment says, that anything not listed here, you're forbidden from doing.
Okay, how do you feel about gun control laws?
Oh, that's an easy one. What does the Constitution say? It says that the Second Amendment says the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms is unquestioned. It's inalienable. So if that's what you're talking about, I don't have any problem at all with that. If what you're saying, does everybody have the right to keep and bear arms? Not necessarily. If a person has a history of mental illness or criminal activity, that's something else again, because the sheriff's job is to protect the community. That's his first job, is to protect people in the county. And so I hope that answers the question. But outside of that, I don't think the people should even have to have a concealed carry permit. Because if you read the Constitution, it doesn't say a word in there about having a permit. That's, again, asking Big Brother for permission.
Do you support the Firearms Federation Act and the Self-Defense Bill, and why?
I absolutely support the Self-Defense Bill. If you're talking about the one that we got passed last year, that specifies that you don't, if somebody comes into your home, you don't have to back up first. It was retreats, what they called it. But before that, it was considered that you must retreat first before you defended yourself or your family. You don't have to do that anymore. Not only that, but you don't have to back up if you're out in public somewhere and you're accosted. And you don't have to think that your life is going to be taken. You just have to understand or be able to show that you felt threatened. And if you defend an innocent bystander that you don't know, you're also protected under that current law. Do I support that? Absolutely. Because it's been shown in every state that passed the concealed carry permit, the right to keep and bear arms, every state, that violent crime has dropped a minimum of 12% in those states. In some cases, it's dropped over 50%, because there is nothing more important for a peaceful community than knowing that if somebody commits a crime, they're likely to get shot because people are armed. So that makes for a very gentle population. And you know, Florida did the first analysis of that. They expected, when they passed their first law relative to the right to carry arms, that the crime rate would really go up. And of course, they tracked every case. And at the end of 3 or 4 years, they discovered that the crime rate hadn't gone up. It had dropped 30-some%. So do firearms create problems? No. As I said to somebody the other day who was supporting the registration of firearms. And my question to them is, how many of the criminal acts that was committed with firearms, how many of those do you suppose that was done with registered weapons? None. Because criminals don't register weapons. So why would you hamstring the gentle public by making them register weapons, or making them, as some states have, say that, yeah, you can carry it, but you must have it in a box in your car, and the ammunition has to be separate and locked in the trunk, etc. And we've got some states here that if you cross that state, try Oregon as an example, and you have a concealed carry permit for Montana, but when you're driving across Oregon, you're required to take that weapon out, put it in a box and lock it, and the ammunition has to be in the trunk or some distant place, which does you a lot of good, doesn't it, if you need it?
Right. So if our federal government came to you and they said, "Okay, Rex, we've got to do this. We've got to start to take away the firearms from the people. We just want to start out with, mainly, automatic little pistols like Glocks and things like that." Would you say, "Oh, yes, sir," and just start going from house to house, taking away weapons from us?
Would I take away weapons if the federal government came in here and said, I would be just exactly like Richard Mack was after the passing of the Brady Bill, when they came into the meeting of the county sheriffs in Arizona and told them basically that. And as I recall reading what Richard Mack had to say, his comment was something to this effect, that the sheriffs in Arizona, in those dozen or so counties in that meeting, were so irate over it and being told by the BATF that they were going to have to do this and this and this. And he said, "I can't tell you what was said in that meeting because there might be some genteel ladies reading this." But he decided that there was no way he was going to do that, and he was the one that filed suit against the federal government. And he and John Prinz from Ravalli County, John Prinz joined with him, the sheriff at Ravalli County, joined with him, and they took them 2 years, but they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that they were right, that the feds didn't have the authority or any business, and they did away with a big part of the Brady Bill. Well, that's kind of my feeling exactly. As long as this state, if the state were to pass a law requiring the confiscation of weapons, the sheriff can only battle that so long. But it'd be a cold day in hell when I'd do it.
So if the feds came in, say I have a herd of cattle or something, and the feds wanted to tax me on them or put some kind of silly chip in them or something like that, and I said no, the sheriff could actually have the authority to tell those feds to turn around and go home.
That's right. Now, if your state had passed a similar law and it was a well accepted one, then while the sheriff could stand his ground, he would be hard pressed to defend it. But that's not the problem. You see, if it's a state law and the people in this county or any county don't agree with it, then they have recourse. They don't have to go to Washington where they're not heard, not listened to, basically laughed at. They keep it on the law on a local basis within the state. And now they can do something about it. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
One of the best examples that I can think of is the one down in Nevada, I believe it was, where a bridge washed out on Forest Service quote-unquote property, and it was a bridge that many of the rural people there used to drive their children to school, and they wanted them to fix the bridge because otherwise they had to drive actually a round trip was 60 miles just to get their kids to school, their children to school, and get back. And they said, well, we'll consider it, but we don't have the funds for it, and it will take us 2 or 3 years to rebuild it because we'll have to do an environmental impact study and all this. And the people said, we can't wait that long. And they said, well, that's how, it takes at least that long. And so the people got together and they said, look, we've got the equipment and the know-how. We'll just do it ourselves. And the federal government says, oh, no, you can't do that. And the sheriff in that county told the powers in that county, said, you just gather up the people and the machinery and you go out there and rebuild the bridge. And they said, well, what do we do if the feds show up? He said, don't worry about it. I'll be there with my posse and I'll take care of it if they show up. So they went out to rebuild the bridge, and the sheriff came out with his posse, and the feds never showed up. And they rebuilt the bridge and got on with their life. So, does the sheriff have that ability? You bet he does.
It was reported that a teacher was actually killed today from a pack of wolves in Alaska. If the feds came in to haul me off